Right?
I believe if it's your own dream, it's okay to chase it. Doesn't matter. But if it's someone
Yeah.
else's dream, chase it with the proper compensation package.
Yeah, exactly. 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 Yeah, I like that.
Hey Mark, how's it going?
Oh, hey, Sabbir, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. So we are live now.
Awesome.
So that's really great that I got you after 1 week. And it's difficult to match our time because you are in Canada, I'm in Bangladesh. So
Yes, the
matching the
most
time
difficult
is.
one is Australia, though. We're one of the more difficult ones from Eastern Time Canada to Australia. That's tricky.
Oh yeah, with Australia we have 4 hours gap, I believe. I don't know, but for Canada it's 10 hours. But the good part is, like, morning and day, morning and night. We mix match, so it's working okay-ish so far.
Yes,
So
for
anyway,
us.
let's start. Welcome back, and I would like to thank everyone who is joining the live stream and the podcast. And in this podcast, that we are going to talk about the benefits, career benefits of working at a startup. Because in the last podcast, we talked about the downside. Basically, we talked about the startup thing, but mostly the disadvantages or the downside. So, Mark, thanks for joining in one more time. So, what's your perspective? What's your perspective regarding the career benefits? Like, what sort of because last time when we talked, it was more like, startups are not paying well, or if they're paying, they're sort of giving the stakes to the people, and as a result, it's sort of they're not getting anything. So we said all the bad things about startups. So, what, from your perspective, what's the benefit actually?
Well, actually, I mean, last time we just said we gave some advice just on what to watch out for as an employee,
Mhm.
right? Just
Yeah.
like there's, good large businesses and large businesses that aren't so great to work for. It's the same thing in the startup world. It's just in the negative cases, we already went over that the last time we spoke. But
Yeah.
there's a few things you have to be careful about. And but let's say you've done your due diligence. Um, the startup looks like a good place to work. We kind of talk about, in this case, what are the good things about working at a startup that is valuing its employees, right? And there's a few things, and a lot of them are just um, flexibility and the way that you're able to you can kind of use to accelerate your career, right? So there's roles in a
Yeah.
startup that you might be able to take on that you
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to take on in a larger company.
For example.
Yes, for example, in a larger company, it might take 10 years to rise up the sales hierarchy, right? Within a
Yeah.
startup, if you start producing results and your goal is to become like a sales manager or the lead salesperson in charge of national accounts, that can be
Yeah.
very possible, right? Because there's not a number of layers of approval to go through. There aren't people who've been there 20 years who have those
Hmm.
positions, right? So as soon as you show value to whoever your immediate uh, your boss is, you can, okay, this employee is showing value. He's showing, for example, in sales, it'd be conversion rates. He's bringing in business. Okay, we'll give him a chance at a higher level position. So
Okay.
like you could move from account executive, senior account executive, national account executive within a year or two,
Hmm.
versus at a larger company that career path might take 10 years.
All right. So it's more of a faster career growth because there are less hierarchies, as well as there are less people working in a startup. So as a result, one person has the opportunity to work in many things, and as a result, they have the opportunity to prove themselves more towards their bosses. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That okay. So if they want to flourish their career, they can focus. They can like a little push can take them to the up to the hierarchy, right?
Right, exactly. And there might not even be a hierarchy. There might not even be people filling in those positions, right? So they're looking for
Yeah.
someone, and they might be looking externally, but it's hard to attract external talent, right?
All
Especially to
right.
smaller companies,
Yeah.
partly because they might be comfortable at the company that they're at. You know, if they're like a top performer or even a mid-level performer. And
Yeah.
then secondly, many people are attracted to the brand of a company, right?
True.
So many
Yeah.
people like that they're working at insert brand name company, and they don't want to go to some smaller startup. Even maybe the startup even offers a higher base or a
Yeah.
higher commission. It's still
Hmm.
not because of the brand, the power of the brand, and what the brand represents. Possibly, at least in their mind, they won't move over. So, as someone who's starting their career, or someone who's more flexible, you you might be able to take advantage of it. Again, keeping in mind what we talked about last time, things to watch
Yeah.
out for in
Yeah.
startups. But
Absolutely.
if it's a legitimate startup, and if it looks like they treat their employees well and they deliver on what they say they'll deliver on, then
Hmm.
then it can be a great opportunity to accelerate your career development. And then when you submit your, let's say the worst case happens, you know, the startup fails, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
you have results on your resume. Um, I keep going back to sales, but you could do this in developments, like as a developer. Maybe you
Yeah.
built an entirely new product, or you built
Absolutely.
and you can show that on your resume. I did this, and I built this from scratch, and
Yeah.
that's very
Absolutely.
impressive.
So you are you have the chance to prove yourself more in terms of, like, as you have more autonomy, so you can be flexible, and you can work a lot, and it's easy to show the performance because you're not competing with a lot of people, you're competing with yourself actually.
Right, you're
uh,
taking a higher risk,
yeah.
usually, but it's often a higher reward.
uh, Employer, yeah, sometimes employer brand, sometimes, most of the time employer brand creates a huge impact on where, like, where the potential people will join and stay, because if you have a strong employer brand, there is a chance you have low attrition rate. People won't leave that much because, end of the day, there is job security is a big thing.
Hmm.
Because when a person is working in a big brand, um, it's more like that their job is more secure than the people who are working in startup. So it's always high risk in startup, but yeah, the gain is also high because those people who want to work independently and who wants to contribute a lot and contribute their full potential, startup is the best place. Because from my perspective, I think where you in a large company, you are just working on a, if I put it into an example of a car, like in a large company you are more of a driver, whereas in a small company like a startup you are more of a mechanic. So you are driving the process, another one you are building the process. So those who are building the process, they are always high valued in the market. So that's a very positive side in the resume as well, because when they will go for interview in other places, if the startup fails, definitely they will get a better chance to get hired because they have the knowledge of the end-to-end process, I would say.
Yeah, I mean it's that if they've shown results there, right? You can't. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then yeah, to take that analogy further, sometime at a large company, you're not even a driver; you're just luggage in the truck. You know, you're
Yeah.
just you're
True.
just along for the ride, and you have to follow
Very true.
directions
Very
the
true.
company's going. So, and then in terms of getting hired elsewhere, um,
Mhm.
yes, it can be impressive if you've shown sales numbers from starting from something from nothing to any sales numbers in sales, or if you're a developer and you built a product from scratch, it's all something you can speak to as you apply for other jobs.
Yeah. That's like one part of the benefit. Like, what about you got empowerment, you got faster career progression, and what else? What else? It's
Yeah, so you can also take on other roles outside a narrow scope of your position.
okay. So it's
So,
job rotation, like changing the job role. Like you can change the job role if you want,
or
actually.
even expanding on your existing job role, and that's
Okay.
more important like earlier in your career. So,
Yeah.
let's say you think you have an interest in a certain position, you'll be able
Hmm.
to try it out. But I've worked at startups where someone started in sales and then they actually moved to the development team. I think they had a
Oh.
little bit of coding experience, but really they didn't have much, and they were able to just basically get trained by these. It was a good startup. They had very good quality developers, but they were open to training this person part time, and he
Hmm.
moved to the development team, and that was possible within a startup. I think some larger companies allow that as well, but usually there's a lot more processes involved. There's requests to HR, and I think it's more difficult. In this case, he basically just, I think he worked, during the day, and then in the evenings or in the lunch breaks, he would work with the developers, and
Okay.
um, and I believe he's now doing development work full time. So
Okay, so it was a job expansion, and then he has taken the other
yeah,
job more seriously, and he is doing it full time.
yeah,
Yeah, that's great. Like if we consider some of the companies like startup, like which become bigger eventually, like Facebook or Amazon or probably Tesla. No, Tesla was like since the very beginning, Tesla had a huge fund. So if we think about like the early 80s in like Apple or Microsoft, they were all startups. And what we have seen from the history that whenever some people are working together to build a startup, they're like really, really passionate about it. They don't care about money that much. Rather, they care about the success factors of their startup. For example, like when it was about Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg was an absolute like bad guy, I would say. uh,
I do not
no,
agree
no, no,
with the
no, no,
opinions
no,
expressed in this
no, 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 no,
podcast.
no, 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 no. I didn't mean to say in a bad guy perspective. I said like he
Dude,
was like theoretically when he was like handling the thing, he was more focusing on the company rather than individuals, because he was thinking about how to expand his business, rather how to cater his friends' emotions. So he was more focused into business, and that's why I said like people might perceive him as a bad guy, but from the perspective of the business, what he did was not so wrong. It was kind of right. And eventually those who are working, they had the same kind of mentality, and there's a say called birds of the same feather flocks together. So then they pretty much gelled in, and Facebook is a, I don't know, $1 trillion company right now. So same goes to Apple. Though there were problems with management at some point of time, but when they grew, they had a viable product, and when they grew, they really grew fast. And those people who were working with them, uh, uh, they were mostly passionate about their work. Uh, and I think if the startup is a legit startup, people don't need to think about the money part, because if that they have a good viable product and the idea, they will eventually get the sales done, and they will have the revenue generated, and people will stay. So whichever top-notch startup which become a big company right now, all of them, they never had this employee problem of like not getting the salary, not getting the benefit. So So mostly fragile or failing startups face this kind of problem, that the problem we stated in the last podcast. But whenever we see the success stories of any of the startup, nobody complained about the money or the payment, because it was a legit company. The product itself was so promising, everyone believed in it, and things went right. So yeah, what do you think, like, if Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or anyone else, if they would start working with a big company rather than starting something of their own, where the world would be right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say, right? Like counterfactuals.
Yeah.
The question is the business idea, was it so unique that someone else wouldn't have come up with it? Um, or was it that they were faster? They got to
Oh,
the market and they got theirs, right? It could have been someone else. It's like when the airplane was invented, the Wright brothers,
yeah.
they launched the first airplane, but if they hadn't done it, someone else would have. However, the Wright brothers were faster, right? And that's a
Mhm.
key thing that you kind of highlighted, is that its speed is a big importance. And then you also mentioned another thing in terms of they were able to attract people to the
Yeah.
startup. Well, they
Mhm.
when you're well funded, it's easier to attract talent. Like a lot of problems can be solved with money, right?
Yeah.
So initially, the founders are going to have to put their own time and effort in, and depending on the viability of the product, right, they'll be able
Yep.
to attract investment funds, and then they
Mhm.
can build out the team far more easily. In many other startups, they might not have the level of funding, so that
Mhm.
and accordingly, it might be more difficult to attract talent. Right, that's the way it is. But in
So
that case, especially for people trying to start their careers, they can take a little bit
yeah.
of a risk and bring that value.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe they're not working on the product side. Maybe they could be working on the product side, improve the product, get more investment money, or they could be working
Mhm.
on the sales side, and they're just bringing in more customers for the existing product, showing again a business case, bringing revenue, and then it's a virtuous cycle, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that kind of tied all those thoughts
So
together.
mainly, if I summarize the point, it's more like if you're working in a big company, lots of prerequisite is already done. Like, big company was startup once upon a time. So when startup, we are talking about the business that has been started very recently, and whenever you're working in a startup, you have to fulfill those prerequisites, like what was happening before, like what needs to be done beforehand. For example, gaining traction from the consumers, and then make a viable product, and then market the product properly, and eventually the product or the service will get traction, and then people will like it, and the company revenue goes high from that point. In a
Yeah, and
large
then they can
company.
attract more people, and then they can attract
Absolutely.
better talent. And yes, but so the
Absolutely.
earlier you are in the startup, the more chance you have of moving up or moving around, right? Because the startup will need you more. But as they grow and grow,
Mhm.
you become kind of you could still be a very important part of the startup, but when you're just joining, there
Mhm.
might be more and more of a structure being built, right? So it
Yeah.
becomes a little bit more challenging to advance very quickly or advance or move horizontally, right? So that's just something to take note of. Yeah.
So, if you are for the career benefits, ultimate career benefit, if I say it, it's like, if you were lucky and if you join the right startup, you can be a part of the history.
Hmm.
And if not, if you if the startup you're joining, if that is a bad decision, that's a good thing for your resume. So it's not a zero sum game. You are gaining
No, it's
something.
not zero sum. It's more of a spectrum, and it doesn't have to be that's a bad startup. It could be like a startup. Yes, it doesn't exit properly, so it's just turned out not to be a viable business idea, or it can grow to a certain size, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to, you know, really grow grow into a huge company, for example, like Amazon or something like that. But it's still a viable business. So you
Mm-hmm.
can grow with that as well. So there's all different scenarios. The main
Yeah.
point is that the earlier you get in, the more
Mm-hmm.
flexibility you have in terms of advancing and moving across as soon as you bring value, because the value you bring will be immediately apparent, right? Because you might be reporting directly to the founders or to the new CFO, and that's a great opportunity for someone.
I would say like there is another point, like another upside of working in a startup, because to take this strategic decision from the top management in a startup is a lot easier because they have less bureaucracy. They are uh, less decision makers. So as a result, when they are taking the decision for any sort of changes, it's faster than large companies. Like for if I say the example of Nokia or Kodak, they were like so big, and they were confused about killing some product line and taking a decision on certain things. Whereas for Facebook, just see from 2006 till now how fast the entire interface changed, because it was they were feeling there's a demand coming. Before the demand coming, they speculated that okay, demands for this particular thing will be higher, so they included those services at Facebook, or even Microsoft or Apple. Like for example, if we talk about iPhone or mobile phone in general, back in 90s, can you imagine that it would be doing video calls over cell phones? Nobody thought of it. So when it's a small company or limited number of decision makers, like it is good. Like you can maneuver your strategy faster than the other people in large companies, right?
Yes, that's basically well, one of the main things that you have as a smaller company. And
Yeah.
if you don't take advantage of that speed, the larger company will eventually notice you, and they could fill
Yeah.
that category, right? Um,
True.
so you have to be, very, very fast in terms of developing your solution, building out your team, building out the model, and eventually
Hmm.
just take over that niche and move to mass before the larger company can catch up,
Yeah, that's true actually.
before the
So
established players. Yeah.
like whenever you are thinking of starting a startup, you have to or you're working for a startup, you have to keep this in mind that if you are not fast enough, if you cannot take the advantage of your lean structure of the company, eventually big companies will eat you alive, because they have more resources. They have all sorts of resources like people, money, physical resources. Everything is there. Everything is okay for them because end of the day, like they have they can actually diversify their portfolio anytime because of their financial flexibility. Whereas for a startup, it's more of generating funds or revenue, uh, and then they can actually cater or create a big infrastructure. But in case of taking the decision faster and take a call faster, uh, I think, yeah, I think startup needs to work really fast, or they have to take advantage of their lean structure.
Right, and that's they have to move fast, not only because of the larger companies, but also for competitors in their space. So um, let's say it's a blue ocean. Let's say there is no established
Hmm.
players, like in the
Hmm.
early automobile industry, at the turn of
Okay.
the
Yeah.
previous century, right? There
Hmm.
were many, many companies initially, and then eventually there were only a few. And it became harder and harder to enter the market, right? Because those
Yeah.
earlier companies, the ones that produce the better products, they produce them faster. They produce them within a system, like for example, Ford with
Yeah.
the assembly line, they were able to create a system that was repeatable and that could produce the cars at lower cost. So they knocked out their they knocked out their competition, right?
Yeah.
So it's not only the larger companies you have to worry about; it's also other startup competitors in the space. So you have to be fast, you have to be flexible, and that's good for the
Absolutely.
employee too, because they can, if they can add to that speed and that flexibility and bring in the revenue or bring in a better product, like work on a better product that helps
Hmm.
the company be again grow faster, then that's a great thing, and they'll be recognized much faster than they would be in a larger company where you're um, a fish in a big pond, a
Yeah.
small fish in a
Small,
giant pond.
small.
Yeah,
Yeah.
small fish, very small fish. Yeah, depending on the size of the company. Yeah.
Mark, I have another, I would say, it's not a question actually. Um, uh, it's a perspective, I would say, that whenever people wants to join a startup, like from the freshers perspective or career progression perspective, when they join the startup, um, uh, it gets sometimes like when the experienced people join this startup, like already they worked in a big companies or something like that, if it seems that they struggle a lot than the people who are just fresher and got out of the universities, and they struggle less. Is that the reason? Because those people who just got out of the university, they have like fresh mind. They are not, their brain is not programmed at all with the corporate mindset. And the other part, I mean, those people, the experienced people, are more, uh, engineered. Their mind is more engineered. Is it the reason, basically?
I mean, I guess yeah, we're just talking kind of in generalities.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, you can get good people from larger companies to move in, but we just like I even noticed from my own experience in terms of
Hmm.
training salespeople. Forget
Yeah.
about university or anything like that. We take people out of high school and
Hmm.
train them. I think some haven't even finished high school, and
Hmm.
you're right that there was a certain open-mindedness
Hmm.
um, versus people who might have been doing it for 30, 40 years. Not
Hmm.
everyone, but and yeah, it made a difference. And not only that, we had an engineer who joined us. So he might have had a lot of experience in his field in engineering, but no sales experience. But he
Hmm.
trained up very, very, very quickly to be like one of the top um, um, BDRs. So yes, because he didn't know what he didn't know, so he's very, very
Yeah.
open, and he had no set ideas of how what's the proper way you have to do it.
Yeah. You
So
know,
there is some truth to that.
yeah. But like for example, if you see John Scully, who actually joined Apple, uh, who used to be the CEO of PepsiCo. So he joined. He couldn't cope, or he got into the corporate politics part actually. So he got into corporate politics. He pushed Steve Jobs out of the company, but never could succeed. Second person who joined as the CEO was Gil Emilio, I believe, and he couldn't do it either. They were like in the verge of bankruptcy, and then suddenly in 1997, Steve Jobs came and changed the whole game. Is it don't you think like because they were like so much into the bureaucratic corporate world, it was difficult for them to understand the tech business, and because tech was booming back then, like
Hmm.
really booming. That was the beginning of the computer era, I would say. So it was hard for them to cope with the with that scenario actually, or with that technological boom.
Yes, and also they didn't really understand that. I guess suppose the company culture. I don't know as much about those business
Yeah.
cases, but from
Hmm.
my understanding, it's quite common that a board of directors might try to appoint leadership from other companies in order to try to save the company, but it doesn't. It often doesn't translate over, right? Because they were used to doing
Yeah.
things a certain way at a previous organization. It just doesn't transfer over. I'm trying to think of a successful example. I'm sure there's a few out there, but yeah, that is sometimes an issue.
Yeah, like for example, if we talk about Alphabet, I mean Google,
Hmm.
uh, uh, though Google works in a startup format, I would say, because they have like different products, and then some people actually take over that particular product, and then they work, the team work as a startup to show success to the company, and
Hmm.
eventually that becomes a viable product, and they launch it to the market. So in that case, for example, Mr. Sundar Pichai, the CEO, he was actually working with Google in a corporate perspective. Eventually, he got the game. Or for the case of Tim Cook from Apple, he was never been a what they call the startup guy. He was more of a corporate guy. So actually, he's also successful right now. So um, uh, it's I think it's more of how you can cope yourself with certain values, and the vision and the mission of the companies. And then if you can cope it well, I believe you can perform. But if you cannot, like if your own perspective or the value is way different than the value of the company,
Yeah.
most likely it fails. You need to digest and ingest the essence of the company.
Well,
Otherwise,
yes, and that's why I suppose external hires are often is more
yeah,
often more difficult to integrate versus someone who's worked from the middle or the who have been with the company before, right? So Tim Cook was with Apple for a long time, from my understanding.
yeah, we
Correct.
got a comment.
Yes, it's a wonderful
we got,
topic.
yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Um, for in Google's case, was he was with Google before as well, or he wasn't an external hire, correct?
No, he was with Google before.
Right,
Yeah,
which kind of just reinforces the point further, right?
yeah,
Hiring and internally wherever possible.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I was trying to think of an example where
The
um,
startup actually worked.
someone else like came in to not even just a startup, but even a business case. But I don't there's not. I'm sure there's a few, but there's not too many.
Yeah.
Not too many examples.
uh, uh, yeah, not too many examples, like the, I think those people who are starting the startups, they are sort of a different breed than the usual people, I would say. Because and those people who wants to work in start there are two kind of people who wants to work in startup. One,
Mhm.
they really believe the idea is great, and they believe that the product is viable, and if they contribute, they will get the return. So this is one category. But another category, I would say, is more like they didn't get any job anywhere, and they need to join somewhere, and they got an opportunity in a startup. Without checking the viability of the startup, they just jump into it because they need something to uh,
Right. And
carry forward. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there was those cases we talked about where this it's might not be a startup. Like there's certain startups you might not want to work for, even if you're
Yeah.
desperate. But if you do find a startup, let's say it wasn't your first choice to work for a startup, think of it as an opportunity to make the most of it, right? To make the most of your time there. So you're gonna have a lot of opportunity to if you're again if you're on the product side, if you're a developer, to grow that product, right, and bring a lot of value to the business, or if you're on the
Hmm.
sales and marketing side, bring a lot of revenue in. So even
Yeah.
though maybe in your head you might be thinking, well, I don't, this is not a company people are familiar with. um, it's not, Pepsi Cola or whatever the case might be. Just try to put those thoughts aside and focus on the value you can bring. And then there's people who are there who just want to be there. And there's a good comment. Aren't startup jobs unstable? Yeah, exactly. And then Sabbir and I kind of talked that many cases the startup is not going to become Amazon.
Yeah.
And then in certain cases, it's not even going to become like a medium-sized business. In certain cases, it's just going to run out of money and fail. So if you are in that startup, firstly, you should be trying to gain as much value from it as possible, right? So you yourself should be compensated for it, being aware of the risk that it could go away anytime, and then also building your resume too at the same time. So showing that, okay, if you're the developer, you were on the team that created this minimum viable product for the startup, or you brought in X amount of revenue in on the sales team or on the marketing team, right? So that is a very good point
Yeah.
about
Right.
they are unstable, and you have to look at your own personal situation of whether you want to take a risk.
Yeah. Because in Bangladesh there are many startups, like quite a few startup. One successful one is, I would say, the 10-minute school. So 10-minute school was a startup. Then another startup is Shop Up. They just got seed funded recently. But these, like, but there were other startups, and many people started the company. But end of the day, like, we can name one or two only, or maximum five.
Mhm.
And most of the time, it's a failed case. So definitely startup jobs are unstable, but even if it fails, definitely you have the opportunity to know different ways not to do things.
or ways to do things. But I mean
Yeah.
the opportunity is really like as a individual, it's just to get a lot of job experience, to get new skills for yourself.
Mhm.
Just going back to referring to that developer friend I had, like he became just from a entry level developer to I think a full stack developer, and he created he increased his value on the market, right? And at the same time, he was still getting paid a decent wage. That was kind of what we talked about in the previous video. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
working for
I
free or
repeat. Yeah. Yeah.
sacrificing yourself for the
Sure.
startup, right? That's
Sure.
it's
Sure.
it's fine for the startup to be unstable. We understand startups are unstable, they're risky, right? That's fine. The part that's not good is, oh, it's unstable and we want you to work for
Work
free.
for
It's like,
free.
well, you're not the founder of the company. Like, you're not.
Yeah.
That's not your obligation. I would, in that case, maybe find a job like even a temporary
Sure.
job like delivering bread or flipping burgers or something might be better for you personally than working at that startup doesn't pay you. But if the startup pays you and it's
Mhm.
still unstable, still risky, you might fail in 2 years, you could still build your resume, build your market value up, and there's the value add you're getting, right? Because there might be an opportunity cost for not working at a more a safer career. So while you're
Absolutely.
there, one of my
Mhm.
friends I stay in touch with still a lot.
Mhm.
He kind of knew one of the startups we worked for was might be seeing its end soon. That
Mhm.
he figured like the business model seems a little bit off here, but he worked as hard as he could within that year to, well, firstly he made quite a bit of money, and then secondly he just got a lot of value in terms of he could go to his next employer and be like, this is what I did, these are my conversion rates, these are my sales numbers. And then for a developer it might be like, I built this product, this is my portfolio, right? So you want to get value, keeping in
Yeah.
mind that the train could go off the rails anytime, and one day the manager might come in with people you don't know, and they're there to fire everyone, right? So that's the way of startups, yeah. But
Yeah.
protect yourself, but and get as much value out of them as possible while you're there.
Absolutely. So for the people who wants to work as an employee to the for a startup, make sure that they are paying you. It doesn't matter whether it is failing or not. First of all, when you get in, you will understand that, okay, the product is not viable that much that you believed before joining. But when you join, make sure you join with a compensation package, uh, a decent one. And then afterwards, if you see that the product is not viable, uh, then you can take a call anytime. But pre-joining, if you just go with the flow with the entrepreneurs, and if you try to get into the chasing dream project, it won't be helpful for the
Yeah, exactly.
employees.
Exactly. Don't chase the dream. Don't chase the idea that the stock options are going to compensate you for all your free work, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then actions speak louder than words too. Make sure that the startup's delivering on their pay to you
absolutely.
as well, right?
I believe if it's your own dream, it's okay to chase it. Doesn't matter. But if it's someone
Yeah.
else's dream, chase it with the proper compensation package.
Yeah, exactly. 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 Yeah, I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Cool.
So
I think that's a good way
yeah,
to leave off, Sabbir.
yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
So Mark, it's great. We will be back. Would you like to say, like, would you like to wrap it up in one or two lines to finish off this podcast to our audiences? Still, few people are
yes,
watching.
I mean, I think your analogy about the dream was
Mm,
great, but that was more kind of referring to our last podcast. But in this case, it's just there's a lot of opportunity to grow your career within a startup, right? So yeah, so there's another example, but it's not related to his career in that case, but it might be a side skill for a future career, right?
yeah.
So try to take advantage of what you can learn and how you
Hmm.
can and what you can advance in and build your resume while you're
Yeah.
there, right? Because not every startup, in fact, most startups will not turn into Amazon. You will not be like the chef from Google. I believe that's a true story. The chef from Google got options and became a millionaire, right? Because he was there at the beginning. But that's probably not going to happen to you. So
True, true, so true.
it could, but
Yeah,
unlikely.
well, if you are like really lucky, then definitely it works. Lucky, and as well as
Savvy, a
um,
little savvy too, to find that startup that's okay, I think this is the idea that can go somewhere, if not to
absolutely
unicorn status, to like a maybe a larger stage company, maybe a viable business. Yeah.
true. Yeah, that's a great point, Mark. You said. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching us. It was a pleasure be with you for the last 40 plus minutes. But yeah, we will be back with more interesting topics in next week, and we are thinking of bringing some guests on board so that we can learn from them as well, and share our perspective. And if you like, please don't forget to like and share this video, and comment as much as you can. If you have any question, you can still comment, and definitely we will get back to you later if we get a good question, and definitely we'll answer it in the next podcast. So thank you very much, Mark. Goodbye. I'll see you soon.
Goodbye, sir.